All right, and good morning. Today's workshop is scheduled to discuss proposed amendments to the Advanced Clean Fleets Regulation in order to implement Assembly Bill 1594. Last April, our board adopted the Advanced Clean Fleets Regulation, a first of its kind regulation designed to phase in the cleanest possible zero emission technologies in the truck and bus market. Last October, the governor and legislature passed AB 1594, which directs CARB to amend the Advanced Clean Fleets Regulation to provide additional flexibility to public agency utilities. My name is Paul Ornasia, and I'm managing the efforts for this rulemaking. I'm joined by several of my colleagues, including Branch Chief Tony Brazil, Manager Chris Franceschi, and Lead Staff Molly Munns. First, to take care of some housekeeping. Today's meeting is presented in a hybrid format, meaning participants can attend in person or remotely via Zoom. This meeting is being recorded, and a copy of this recording will be made available on our website in a few days. For those attending in person, restrooms are located out the doors behind you and to the left. In the event of an alarm, please remain calm and listen to the instructions given over the intercom. If we are asked to evacuate the building, please do so by using the stairs and following instructions from the building security personnel. The primary evacuation assembly site for the Cal EPA building is Cesar Chavez Plaza, located diagonally across the southwest of the building. Because this is a hybrid meeting, I'm going to ask the participants attending in person who wish to speak, comment on the podium to the side once you get to the comment period. Participants attending remotely will need to use the raise hands feature on the Zoom platform and unmute themselves when called upon. Please note that the chat feature in Zoom will not be available. When commenting, please introduce yourself by first stating your name and affiliation. So this past March, we formally kicked off the workshop process and asked stakeholders for feedback on how CARB should implement AB 1594. We heard from public utilities that they are seeking relief through the bill as quick as feasible, and through the numerous meetings with these utilities, we heard feedback on how to structure the new provisions. We've taken steps to implement parts of the bill as quick as possible through Section 100 changes, which is a process which allows us to make non-discretionary changes without going through the full rulemaking process, and are aiming for a board hearing on an accelerated timeline. What we're presenting today attempts to strike a balance between meeting utilities' needs to maintain public services and maintaining emission benefits critical for Californians' public health. And with all that said, I'll now pass off to Molly, who will walk us through today's presentation.
Thanks, Paul. Welcome to the second workshop on Assembly Bill 1594. As Paul mentioned earlier, the bill was signed into law a little less than a year ago. We had our first public workshop on March 25th of last year, and since then have had ongoing conversations with trade groups representing California's public agency utilities. Staff expedited non-discretionary parts of Assembly Bill 1594 by drafting those parts as Section 100 changes to the Advanced Clean Fleets Regulation. Those changes were approved by the Office of Administrative Law on August 26th of this year and became effective on October 1st. That was Tuesday. Next slide. Today, I will be going over some background, launch into our proposed regulatory text, and wrap up with some next steps. Afterwards, we will take questions from those in the room and from those who are attending remotely over Zoom. Assembly Bill 1594. It requires CARB to amend the Advanced Clean Fleets Regulation, applies to traditional utility specialized vehicles used by public agency utilities, reevaluates the 13-year minimum useful life threshold used to determine eligibility for some provisions, and expands existing daily use exemption to allow for more comprehensive usage data. The Advanced Clean Fleets Regulation has 4 components. The 2 that apply to the amendments that we are discussing today are the state and local government fleets and the high priority fleets components. The ZEV purchase pathway is the default compliance pathway for all California state and local government fleets, including city, county, special district, and state agency fleets, who are required to ensure 50% of new vehicle purchases are zero emission beginning in 2024, and 100% of new vehicle purchases are zero emission by 2027. Small government fleets of 10 or fewer vehicles and those in designated counties would start their ZEV purchases beginning in 2027. The model year schedule is the default compliance pathway for high priority fleets. where they must purchase only ZEVs, and starting January 1, 2025, they must remove internal combustion engines at the end of their useful life. Alternatively, both high priority and state and local government fleet owners may elect to meet ZEV milestone targets as a percentage of their total fleet, starting with the vehicle types that are most suitable for electrification. Turning to benefits, this widespread electrification of the state's trucks and buses is expected to result in significant emission reductions in particulate matter from reduced brake wear, oxides of nitrogen, and greenhouse gas emissions. CARB's advanced clean trucks, advanced clean fleets, and heavy-duty omnibus regulations get substantial emission reductions. These reductions are key in meeting the state's 2031 and 2037 ozone attainment goals called for in the state implementation plan and for achieving carbon neutrality by 2045. As you can see from this list, there are a dozen different extensions and exemptions that address situations where a ZEV might not be available to meet a fleet's needs and give some flexibility to fleets as they phase in ZEVs over the next decade or two. The table and circle on the slide highlight two exemptions we believe are impacted by Assembly Bill 1594, the ZEV purchase and the daily usage. Please be aware that these two exemptions are only available for those following the model year schedule and the ZEV purchase schedule, or for those electing for the ZEV milestones option. It is not available to drayage trucks. Now, I will briefly discuss the eligibility requirements for these two exemptions. The eligibility requirements for these two exemptions are based on the fleet's compliance pathway. For the model year schedule, internal combustion engine or ICE vehicles are eligible once they reach 16 years old or when the vehicle reaches 700,000 miles, whichever occurs first. And the fleet owner must request and obtain the exemption 1 year before the next available compliance date. For the ZEV purchase schedule, ICE vehicles are eligible once they are 13 years old. For the ZEV milestones option, a fleet owner must demonstrate their next applicable ZEV milestone cannot be reached without exemptions by requesting and obtaining exemptions for all ICE vehicles in their California fleet. And with the model year schedule, the fleet owner, following the ZEV milestones compliance pathway, must request and obtain the exemption no later than 1 year before the next applicable compliance date. Now I will explain these two exemptions in more detail. The ZEV purchase exemption allows a fleet to purchase a new ICE vehicle if a zero-emission vehicle is unavailable. The ZEV purchase exemption has two pathways: a streamlined list, which contain ICE vehicle configurations not available as a ZEV by weight class. The list will not include any vehicles commonly available as a ZEV, including pickups, buses, box trucks, vans, or tractors. The streamlined list may include ICE vehicles commonly used by public agency utilities, such as those in the bucket, boom, dump, water, crane, drill, and vacuum configurations, if the vehicle is not available as a ZEV. This list will be posted on our website by January 1st of next year, and if the vehicle is on the list, then the fleet can purchase the ICE vehicle. There is also a fleet-specific application. For this pathway, a fleet owner must identify the ICE vehicle being replaced, then demonstrate that a comparable ZEV or NZEV, which is a plug-in hybrid, that meets the existing ICE vehicle primary intended function and necessary key features is not available. The daily usage exemption allows a fleet to purchase an ICE vehicle if no battery electric vehicle or BEV is available that can meet the demonstrated daily usage needs of the existing ICE vehicles of the same weight class and configuration as the vehicle being replaced. Daily usage refers to the average daily mileage or energy usage demands of vehicles in a fleet. Please note that the daily usage exemption cannot be used for the purposes of adding new vehicles to a fleet. Fleets may access the daily usage exemption if at least 10% of their California fleet is comprised of ZEVs, or near zero emission vehicles, or NZEVs, plug-in hybrids. Next, I want to cover certain situations in which CARB staff will not approve a daily usage exemption request. CARB will not approve a daily usage exemption request for a vehicle that is available to purchase as any of the following: a NZEV, or plug-in hybrid capable of a minimum number of all-electric miles, a hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicle, or a BEV with a battery capacity as shown on the slide. As a rule of thumb, the battery capacity is shown should be capable of over at least 200 miles in a charge or more, depending on the efficiency of the vehicle. Now, I will describe the non-discretionary parts of Assembly Bill 1594 that were approved through a Section 100 change to ACF. Next slide. As I mentioned earlier, the Section 100 changes were approved by the Office of Administrative Law and became effective on Tuesday. The Section 100 changes include the definition of a public agency utility, which is comprised of 4 distinct entities, all defined in statute. There are more than 40 publicly owned electric utilities and hundreds of public water districts in California. There are over 1,000 wastewater treatment plants throughout California, largely operated by public agencies. There are around 3,000 community water systems across the state, and some are privately held companies. Section 100 changes were also approved for part of the statute that allows a public agency utility to provide comprehensive usage data for a class of vehicles that does not exclusively rely on the lowest mileage reading and does not exclude the highest usage days. To explain this change, I will show an example of how the daily usage exemption applies to a fleet of utility vehicles of the same weight class and configuration. Then show how the Section 100 changes impact how the daily usage exemption applies to a fleet of traditional utility specialized vehicles of the same weight class and configuration. This slide provides an example of a daily usage exemption application submitted for all Class 6 utility trucks with the same configuration in a fleet. The example shows 4 Class 6 utility trucks with daily mileage data that was collected for 30 consecutive workdays. Only 10 readings are shown here due to space constraints. CARB will take the lowest mileage reading for each day from that data set. From that, the 4 highest daily readings, all shown in bold formatting, are evaluated. CARB staff will then exclude the 3 highest readings and use the 4th highest reading in the determination. The 4th highest daily reading in this example is 81 miles, which is denoted by an asterisk. In this example, the replacement BEV has a manufacturer-rated battery capacity of 109 kilowatts hours, which is divided by the regulation-stated efficiency factor of 1.3 kilowatt hours per mile. In this example, the calculated range of the available BEV is 84 miles. Since the calculated BEV capacity is greater than the 4th highest reading, an exemption would not be granted since the BEV can be deployed. Next slide. If the fleet owner still needs to replace another Class 6 utility truck of the same weight class and configuration, then they could exclude the data set for truck 1, since they would be purchasing a BEV. In this example, the exemption would be granted for the 2nd truck because the 4th highest reading is 94, which is more than the calculated 84-mile range for the available BEV. This iterative approach helps find how many BEV can be deployed. Now, to explain how the Section 100 changes apply to the daily use exemption. This slide provides the same data set shown earlier for the Class 6 utility trucks, except this data submission is for a fleet of traditional utility specialized vehicles. For a traditional utility specialized vehicle, the 3 highest daily readings are not excluded. Therefore, the highest daily reading is 246 miles, shown in bold and denoted by an asterisk, which is used for CARB's determination. In the same example shown earlier, The highest daily reading significantly exceeds the 84 miles of the comparable BEV. In this example, all the vehicles would be eligible for an exemption. Section 100 changes give more leeway to public agency utilities without providing a blanket exemption for their vehicles. We understand that in emergency situations, drivers are swapped out and the traditional utility specialized vehicles remain in use 24/7. There is no vehicle on the market that can meet these usage requirements without an opportunity to fuel. We understand that long charging times currently needed to fuel BEVs are perceived as a barrier and that mobile charging solutions can't yet meet DC fast charge times. For infrequent emergency solutions, DC fast charging speeds can be met with portable power solutions such as generators, which may already be deployed for the emergency operation. Infrequently deployed portable power solutions can support a fleet's ZEV deployment, which lower emissions overall. Staff are not proposing to make any changes to the daily usage determination for public agency utilities, but are proposing to limit the Section 100 changes to traditional utility specialized vehicles. Next, I will describe staff's preliminary regulatory text for the discretionary parts of Assembly Bill 1594. Staff are proposing to add a new definition for traditional utility specialized vehicle to mean all 4 items on the list, and the vehicle must also meet one of the conditions in list item 5. Since our initial workshop, staff have incorporated feedback from public agency utilities and are now proposing weight class 3 be included. Staff also added the manufacturer's stated towing capacity and are now including the vehicle be equipped with 4 or 6-wheel drive, in addition to the PTO that was included in the initial workshop. Some parts of the definition, items 2 and 3 listed above, are included by staff to guard against situations where a large fleet owns and operates some vehicles that serve the part of the agency or company that meets the definition of a public agency utility, but they also own and operate other vehicles that primarily serve other divisions that do not meet the definition of a public agency utility. For example, using this definition, a city manager with multiple departments could only claim vehicles in their water and power department operating under section 224.3 of the Public Utilities Code, but not their general maintenance vehicles used by public works departments. And for another example, a CEO of an investor-owned electric utility owns and operates a high priority fleet. The private utility also happens to own a small private community water system. Staff's proposed definition only considers the vehicles operated primarily to maintain the community water system as traditional utility specialized vehicles, since those meet the definition of a community water system, as defined in section 116275 of the Health and Safety Code. Next slide. Besides defining a traditional utility specialized vehicle, Assembly Bill 1594 also requires CARB to consult with public agency utilities on other criteria besides model year that can be used to determine when a traditional utility specialized vehicle can be replaced. As mentioned earlier, 13 years or 16 for high priority fleets is used as eligibility criteria for the daily usage and ZEV purchase exemptions. Establishing this qualifying criteria was necessary to ensure that exemptions were not requested prematurely within the normal useful life of an ICE vehicle, and reduces the likelihood that a fleet owner might purchase an ICE vehicle because it is unavailable as a ZEV. Staff proposed to give public agency utilities early access to the ZEV usage and the daily usage and the ZEV purchase exemptions. This proposal allows a public agency utility to choose between relying on a predetermined vehicle replacement purchase plan approved by their decision-making authority, or if they do not have one, they can use this predetermined equipment replacement schedule supported by the Public Utility Commission for Investor-Owned Utilities, Department of Transportation, and Caltrans. This predetermined replacement schedule is based on minimizing cost. This wraps up staff's initial proposal to implement Assembly Bill 1594. Next, I will move on to a few other minor clarifications included in staff's preliminary draft regulatory text for the high priority fleets and state and local government agency fleets components of the Advanced Clean Fleet regulation. Modifications were made to the transit agency exemption to apply to exclude trucks owned and by agencies that serve multiple functions like road and maintenance, sanitation, and transit services. This has no impact on transit agencies that solely provide transit services. We're also proposing to align certain exemption application timeframes under the ZEV milestone option with the intent of those provisions. Modify some required exemption documentation details, ensure that exemptions are only granted to government fleets for situations outside of their control, and limit the types of entities that must check if they are hiring a compliant fleet. Please see the draft regulation that was posted on our website on Monday for more details about these modifications. And we'll be here to answer questions as well. So next steps, we're interested in your feedback and comments on the preliminary draft regulatory language we posted on Monday. Staff is hoping to bring our proposal to the board in early 2025.
Okay, thank you, Molly. That concludes our presentation. So just as a reminder, we're going to open Q&A now, so feel free to ask about anything related to today's presentation. We'll be taking comments in person first, so if you have comments, feel free to line up at the podium over there, and we'll be happy to take questions. Once we're done with all the commenters in the room, we can switch to hands raised online. Okay, and I think we can get to it then.
There we go. Thank you very much. My name is Frank Harris. I'm with the California Municipal Utilities Association, and I appreciate being able to offer a few comments, ask some questions today. I have a number of them, so I think I'll just ask a few and be polite and then get back in line after other people have an opportunity. One is not strictly AB 1594, but Molly, you mentioned that the daily usage exemption is not available for adding new vehicles to the fleet. And this is something we talked about during the rulemaking, because many of my members are seeing expansion both in their load through electrification, AI, data centers, but also their geographic space. So they are required to add trucks to serve those new areas and maintain that increased load. And so what is available for expansion of your fleets if a ZEV or an NZEV is not available for the use? I mean, I don't see anything in the regulation right now, but I think that's something we need to really pay attention to. And one other comment, and then I'll get out of line and let other people get in there. You mentioned measuring the value, or I should say the storage capacity of a battery based on anticipated miles. And I note that the alternative that you offered that is used in the PUC offers some mileage, I should say, of the vehicles, but also recognizes engine hours. And so I really would like to find a way to recognize engine hours or fuel use in addition to miles. And I say that because the diversity of my membership, I have members that have approximately the same number of meters on the electric side. But in one case, they might put the same number of hours or approximately the same number of hours, say, on a Vector truck and a hydraulic digger. Yet one has such a huge service area that even with approximately the same number of customers, they'll see 3 or 4 times the miles as the smaller one, even though their engine hours are approximately the same. And I think this is something we really want to look into and see if we can try to solve that problem. So thanks again. I'll get out of line, let some of the others jump in here, and then I'll probably come back. Thanks.
All right, hi. Good morning. My name is Sarah Delorier. I serve as the Director of Air, Climate, and Energy Programs for the California Association of Sanitation Agencies, or CASA. We represent more than 90% of the steward population of California. And we support the state's pursuit of carbon neutrality by 2045 while also protecting human life and the environment and supporting community resilience by performing wastewater collection and treatment services. We strongly support the implementation of AB 1594 requirements into the ACF regulations for that reason and appreciate the opportunity to provide further input. So to ensure our members' critical services remain reliable and compliant with multiple regulations across water, air, solid, energy, the wastewater sector really does need that ability to perform preventive and emergency response measures in all circumstances. Not only are state regulations requiring the sector increased levels of required maintenance across public sewers, the sector is also experiencing those increased in frequency and extreme events that require the increased levels of emergency response, as we've talked about before. So getting to the amendments today, the new section 2013U that identifies the two pathways for being granted early access to exemptions, either meeting usage thresholds or providing the proof that the vehicle is included in a vehicle replacement purchase plan that's signed by a designee. We had a couple clarifying questions that came up through members. Does this new section 23U2, which is that vehicle replacement purchase plan pathway, allow a POTW early access to those exemptions just by means of having that vehicle included in that vehicle replacement purchase plan? Of course, assuming it's signed and approved by their boards or general managers, the designee that's I guess assigned there, and that plan is separate from these thresholds. We did read in section 2013.3L that it simply requires documented proof of the plan that's signed by the designee, but it also mentioned replacement criteria. And those replacement criteria we assume are specific to that agency's plan. So we just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, so we can definitely respond to that. So first, in regard to that section, so you would need to, at the time of applying for the exemption, submit like an attestation or statement saying that this vehicle is being replaced in accordance with that plan. We don't need an actual copy of it, just that you need to say that it fits into whatever criteria your agency has laid out. And if so, you'd be eligible for that exemption. These are two separate options. So you can either just use your own agency plan to qualify for the exemption, or you can show that exceeds these mileage thresholds. It's either or, not both at the same time. So it's just meant to be a more flexible option, but these miles and hours are another option available for you if you want, if that would work for you as well.
Thank you. And so then the definition of the traditional utility specialized vehicles is something that we'll comment on in more detail in a written form, since we need to review that a little bit more in the bullets that were presented today.
Got it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there. Good morning. My name is Megan Murray on behalf of SCAPA. SCAPA is a joint powers authority with 12 publicly owned electric utility members, each governed by a board of local officials who collectively serve nearly 5 million folks throughout Southern California. As sponsors of the bill, SCAPA has a vested interest in the development of the changes to the ACF rule as prescribed in AB 1594. These changes are necessary to ensure that SCAPA members using the specialized utility vehicles they need in order to maintain a safe, reliable supply of electricity for their customers. We especially want to thank staff for hosting this workshop and sharing the draft regulatory text and the slides ahead of time so we can review them and provide for more robust discussion today. While we're still reviewing among all of our members and we'll follow up with more specific feedback, we appreciate the effort CARB staff have made to include a definition of traditional utility specialized vehicles and the provisions related to early access for traditional utility specialized vehicles. We believe there is further discussion needed regarding the daily usage exemption for traditional utility specialized vehicles to ensure that comprehensive data can be provided by those who need to enact the daily usage exemption. We look forward to continuing to work with you on that language that supports necessary utility operations under unknown, often unique conditions, and which aligns with the requirements of AB 1594 and objectives of the Advanced Clean Fleets Program. Thank you again for the opportunity to weigh in at this workshop and your efforts to support the productive engagement today. We appreciate it. Thanks.
Good morning, Nick Blair with the Association of California Water Agencies, or ACWA, commenting this morning. We represent over 470 public water agencies throughout California, which services about 90% of the water used throughout the state. We do appreciate CARB hosting this workshop and giving us a chance to review the proposed changes and presentation ahead of the workshop today. We appreciate the overall direction CARB is giving for more flexibility to public fleets in the proposed traditional special utility definition added to the draft language. We do have some input and clarifications, as other folks have noted as well, that we're hoping can help with this conversation. First, we have some thoughts with the added bullet points to the definition. Some members expressed that it might be beneficial to add a third bullet to what is, I guess, on page 10, section 5, which is also on slide 17. And this would be for vehicles with towing capacity that don't have PTO or 4 to 6 wheel drive, but they do have, but there are specialty utility functions that they think are very essential. So I can follow up with that in written commentary. And we understand that it wouldn't just be an all-encompassing towing capacity. We would have a weight threshold. So I think initially we were thinking maybe 30,000 pounds and up. As far as the usage thresholds, thanks first for the clarity that it would be an either or. If you have attestation and an existing plan, that could be used, or the usage thresholds. That said, when we discussed with members the usage thresholds, some expressed concern that it might not be an improvement of the 13-year requirement, just because in some cases you have agencies that are not going to be going that amount of miles. So there was question about where those mileage amounts came from. I think you kind of touched upon that, but maybe we can dig a little further into that. Some agencies had a thought, and I think you kind of brought it up with a, where was it? The power takeoff usage of 4,000 miles. So there was some thinking on an equivalency of what that could look like for hours used instead of mileage that we can discuss further. Looking farther on page 22, there was a section added about, and it says like all purchases purchased during the compliance year, and something about sufficient number of ZEVs. There was some questions about what sufficient would come out to mean, and if a fleet seeks exemption early in the year before their entire purchase plan for the year is executed, what that might look like. And I realize I'm rambling here. I'm just trying to speak slowly and get these all out here in a timely fashion. And then it's not related to the changes themselves, but because we are in the early years right now of the 50% ZEV versus ICE requirements, with the release of that list by January 1 of 2025, there's a request for clarity on if a vehicle is on that list and that someone can go forth with purchasing as an ICE, how does that factor into the 50-50? Is it a separate purchase that they don't need to worry about with their 50-50, or does it somehow loop into that? There are a few questions about that. And then I guess I'll add one more just for the sake of getting to other speakers. In the event that a agency is not replacing an existing vehicle, but that, let's say their service territory is expanding and they're simply growing their fleet, how does that factor into the requirements for replacing an existing vehicle?
So I can address at the very least the replacement portion. So currently we're not looking to adjust the regulation away from the requirement to replace vehicles that are already in the fleet or to address fleet expansions.
Okay.
In the final statement of reasons, we kind of responded to similar comments about that by fleet expansions are within the control of the fleet owner and exemptions are designed for situations outside of the control of the fleet owner. In terms of replacements too, just to note that replacing a vehicle would only be required under the ZEV purchase exemption for fleets using the model year schedule or the ZEV purchase schedule. They're not required to replace them under the ZEV milestones option. So if a fleet does decide that they need to expand or want to apply for exemptions without having to replace an existing vehicle, they can switch to the ZEV milestones option. Granted, that does have the added layer of showing that no other combustion vehicle in the fleet can be replaced, but there is an option there for fleets that want to do that expansion.
Okay, and I guess I can respond quickly about, thanks for the feedback on the towing. I think the 30,000 pounds is interesting. We can kind of discuss further. I think we've heard that like any vehicle with towing would be potentially open, which I think our issue is that functionally like any combustion power vehicle has a towing capacity that might not be big, but it'll be there. So there's like a threshold we can look at that'll be pretty useful for us to like see like what is a good bar there.
Certainly. Okay.
Hi, I'm Emily LeMay with the Northern California Power Agency, or NCPA. I represent 16 public power entities throughout Northern California. 14 of them are covered by the language in AB 1594. I really appreciate this pre-rulemaking process. It's been a good experience working with you on coming up with this draft language and having the time to kind of work through the details. I think the draft is headed in the right direction, particularly when we're looking at the traditional utility specialized vehicle definition and also the end of life determination with the options. We will go back and we'll look at the actual language and make sure that there aren't any issues or clarifications needed, but we like the direction of it. I will also add on to Aqua's comments on towing that I've heard at least one type of vehicle that's not currently covered that tows like water pumping equipment for emergencies. And I can provide you more details on that, but it is another situation where we might be able to find, a certain threshold of towing that could be covered by that language. I also agree with SCAPA's comments that the daily usage exemption still needs some work to address the issues with ensuring that the vehicles that we're replacing can actually meet all of our needs, emergency response. We're in a situation now where emergencies are more frequent and they're getting harder, and we need to be planning kind of for the future deployment to respond to those emergencies and not just, least case kind of situation. So we will continue to work with you on that language and see if we can find something that works there. I also want to make sure that we address the issue with calculating equivalent mileage in the daily usage exemption for when we do not have the BEV mileage to provide for when we have stationary work, and whether we can come up with some number that would work in those kinds of situations. I know we've talked about this in the past, so we'd be interested in exploring that further and getting that option built into the daily usage exemption. So that's all for me. Thank you.
Hello, John Costantino on behalf of CEEB, the California Council on Environmental and Economic Balance. I am not a public utility representative, but our group has members that are public utilities. So coming from that angle, also coming from the angle of there are changes that are outside of the 1594 scope. So I want to talk about those for a second. First of all, thank you for the process, getting the materials out in advance, the slides out in advance, having a docket, having the comments posted, and working collaboratively with the utilities. It sounds like that is happening. So appreciate all of that. First question, and I have a couple. Does any of the changes that are being made outside of state and local government, so the high priority fleet, impact the waiver request?
Yeah.
I don't actually know how to answer that. That's my best answer. I don't know how to answer that. That would be a legal question, so I'm going to defer.
Okay. Well,
I mean, and I can say broadly, the changes we're talking about are relatively minor. I mean, so I would presume we would say those aren't really changing the scope of the waiver or anything like that.
So that leads to the question about changes that are being made. Adding corporate parent, has that been looked at? I mean, why was that done? Because somebody could be owned by somebody bigger, and I mean, you keep going up the corporate ladder. You really have changed maybe, I don't know, who this rule applies to. Berkshire Hathaway owns lots of companies. And if you scroll all the way down, at some point, you might get to 50 million where the fleet itself wasn't. So have you looked at that? Why was that made? And where is that coming from?
I think that is, I mean, largely that change was made to just work out a detail that meets the exact intent of what we were doing in the first place. I think it just makes it more direct, because it was a drafting edit, if you want to call it that, to make sure that it was very clear. When we talk about the 50 million threshold, it is any entity and any combination of entities that operate under the same parent are all included. And that was where we started from the beginning in the rulemaking and so on. So it's just a detail to make it as clear as possible.
So if there's a very large entity that owns a small entity that isn't 50 million or 50 trucks, now all of a sudden that small entity has to come up with the capital and talk to the large corporate parent. I mean, it seems like that is a significant change.
Okay,
Or
yeah,
a material change.
I mean, honestly, I haven't really identified a single company that wouldn't fit that, but we want to make sure that language, so there's no, so that it's crystal clear. I mean, if every part of Google is, or Alphabet is going to be affected by this rule if they're operating vehicles in the state. That's always been the intent. So,
okay,
yeah,
I'll think about that one. There's another, Molly mentioned in changing the intent of the timing. And so the 2 year, 2 years, you can't get an exemption more than 2 years in advance. That is also another change which wasn't in the rule and now is. So I guess, so we can talk about that, I guess. But the question is, since there are other non-1594 changes that CARB is proposing, are you accepting suggestions for other clarifications outside of specialized utility vehicles for this rulemaking?
I mean, it's a balancing act. I mean, if it's a tweak or something that is making it easier for the regulated fleet to understand the provision, or a detail that needs to be worked out that is implied in the language and could be made more explicit, I would say yes. But going beyond that, we're not opening up the rulemaking for all kinds of changes. No. So there's a balance there.
Yeah, I can add that. I mean, our board did approve this like last April with all this in mind, like all responses in the F store. So the main requirements, I think, are generally in line. The stuff on the edges and the actual portions in the 1594, I think that's where we can focus discussion. But getting beyond that, we think would be beyond what the board just made the decision on last year.
Okay. And I don't have any additional suggestions today. We're a large group. We have to have actual meetings, and we'll get back to you. The addition of dealers, what was the logic behind that, and how do you see that changing the rule?
Yeah. Okay, I'll just take it now. Yeah. So this is for the zero emission vehicle purchase exemption. The language specifies that the letters need to come from the manufacturers when a buyer goes to purchase the vehicle. And so it does not allow that letter to come from a dealer who's an authorized representative of the manufacturer. So by adding the dealer into the application process, then that would allow the fleet owner to go to the dealer who they normally would go to actually buy the vehicle from the manufacturer. And so that again is a detail, but does allow the applicant to use the dealer rather than a manufacturer letter to provide their evidence that they went to try to purchase this EV from them.
So if I go to a dealer and they give me a letter, do they have to be an authorized dealer of that more than one manufacturer? I'm just trying to make sure that we haven't created some sort of, I went to 2 dealers and then,
Yeah.
But that's not good enough because they didn't represent Ford or Isuzu or somebody you think makes something else.
Yeah, so just to add to that, so the regulation as it's currently written requires a fleet to go to a manufacturer that offers a ZEV or NZEV in the same weight class and configuration as the vehicle being replaced. This would expand that to allow folks to go to a dealership that represents that manufacturer rather than going directly to the manufacturer. We were hearing some fleets were having difficulty getting letters directly from a manufacturer representative versus just going to like a Ford dealership and saying, hey, Ford doesn't, sell a vehicle in this weight class or configuration. So this is really just intended to streamline the application process for fleets that are trying to get these letters from manufacturers to allow them to use dealership letters instead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another question I have is about changing the definition of dispatch for control. Can you talk about that a little more?
Yeah, I'll add that one. So that one is actually narrowing that requirement a little bit because the current language is about directing and controlling, or directing and operating, and directing and what was the other one?
Fleets that hire and operate, or
Hire.
fleets that hire and direct the operation.
Yeah, did you hear that? So
Yeah,
hire and
yeah.
operate. And so we're changing it from that directing language to the actual ones who are dispatching trucks. So we already have a definition of dispatching. So it actually makes it a little narrower than what it was. But not a big change again, because most of the way the current language would still most likely be ultimately people who are dispatching the trucks that are affected. So it's not it's not a big change.
Don't take. I get that it's a narrow, so don't think it's an opposition. I just wanted to clarify that if in the definition of dispatch says you operate it, let's say where it goes on a given day, that sort of thing. So I just want to make sure it's clear to the membership, and I understand what the logic is behind that. Yeah, this wasn't one I was going to talk about, but expanding your fleet, you said is beyond the control of, expanding the fleet is within the control of the fleet. That may be true for private fleets. I don't know if it's true for public fleets. So you might want to look at that one again. I mean, certainly I can not take on more business, and that's within my control, but I don't know that was the intent of the rule. But if an area is annexed, or they put in a whole new development and you have to have more trucks, you're obligated to respond to that. So
no, and I want to make sure, I want to just kind of address that point. The regulation addresses, so to be as direct as possible. So there's the model year schedule that's very rigid based on model year miles. And there's state and local government purchases that's very specific about purchases, but only when purchases are made. And so the way those are constructed have the pros and cons of that particular approach. Everybody can use the milestone option that has all kinds of flexibility. You could expand your fleet all you want, and you can buy and sell combustion trucks all you want too. But you just have to have a certain number of ZEVs and phase those in over time. So if a fleet's looking at expanding, I would probably look at the milestone option. And honestly, for a lot of different issues that people have with, hey, I don't keep trucks that long, or I want to keep them longer than the model year schedule allows, for instance, is like, hey, milestone option gives you the flexibility to address those things. So I just want to make sure that it's not misunderstood. The regulation has a mechanism to allow fleets to expand, grow, and incorporate ZEVs where they see there's going to be the best fit for their particular operation, even though the other options might not be as flexible.
Sure, but if you're a state and local government, you may not be choosing the milestone because you don't want to give up useful life left on vehicles and a variety of things. So it's just again, I wasn't planning on talking about that, but just the idea that a utility has control over who they service struck me as interesting. When you click on the comment log submittal, it says the deadline is December 31st, 2024. Is that accurate?
That's somewhat of a placeholder. We'll need to close down the informal comment docket before we launch the official docket sometime early next year. So we just put that as a placeholder for now. So yeah, I guess on that topic. So this is our workshop. We are seeking feedback. So if we could get comments back in 2 weeks would be ideal, 3 weeks. That'll probably be good just to make sure we can hear about and incorporate into the rulemaking process we're expecting to go through.
Okay, I think that might be all I have for now. Thank you.
About 24 hours.
Thank you again, Frank Harris with the California Municipal Utilities Association. I appreciate the opportunity to offer a few more comments, questions. And I do want to go back to what Mr. Costantino was just talking about in terms of fleet expansion. It is absolutely true that the overwhelming majority of my members see a problem with the milestone option because of the potential that they might be compelled under the milestone option to retire vehicles before their useful life. And this creates a problem given that they are public agencies and have a fiduciary responsibility to their ratepayers and local taxpayers. And so many of them see that as an option that's not feasible for them based on their legal obligations to their ratepayers and their taxpayers. But given that, yeah, they don't have, I think this conflates the idea that they may have control. I think conflates private fleets, say business fleets, shipping companies, they can choose whether or not to expand their operations with public fleets that don't get that choice. And one other point I wanted to make on this that I'd like to consider is that we're at the front edge, particularly my electric members. I mean, I represent about, I think all but one publicly owned electric utility in the state, and many more public water agencies in the state. On my electric side, in particular, we're the tip of the spear for a lot of California's clean energy policies, particularly with electrification of buildings and transportation. And I question the message that we're sending that you have control over expanding, but by the way, start serving increased electric load. That just doesn't seem to mesh with me. And I'd really like to be able to talk about this more because we have a real concern there. And then on the water side, all you have to do is drive from here to San Francisco and see the increased number of homes that are being built along the 80 to see that, and I have water members out there, to see that they're seeing significant expansion in their service obligations as public water agencies, and can't say, no, we're not going to serve that area. On the electric side, at least it's ultimately an economic decision for our customers. For example, if a customer in Palo Alto says, we want to build a new data center, and the electric utility says, okay, I mean, it's an infrastructure issue, but it's also a moving infrastructure issue, if you will. I mean, that may not be the right term, but if they can't service that area in a certain period of time, then the data center does, the company will make a decision and move out of state. And I'm sure that's not a message that the state of California wants to send. I am similarly curious about the distinction between directs the operation to dispatch. We have to think about that more. And just as Mr. Costantino said, I'm not sure it's a complaint or an opposition at all. We just want to understand it better. But let me bring it back to more positive now. I'm sure you'd love to hear that, unusual for me, but we absolutely appreciate the language and support virtually all of the language on the definition of a utility specialized vehicle. We appreciate the language stipulating that the vehicle retirement plan or protocol should be signed by an authority or the authority's designee. We support the idea that the individual utility can determine who gets to approve that plan as opposed to the state agency. So there's a lot of positives here, still a lot of questions, and I have raised some questions outside of 1594. Now I'll close with the daily usage language. This is something whereas we've talked quite a bit, and by the way, absolutely appreciate the opportunity to get together with staff informally leading up to this and some of the other workshops that have already been held. But we have talked about the daily usage language and what energy. Well, right now it's mileage, but again, need to look at comprehensive energy use language that was in 1594, both to compare to a BEV that doesn't exist for that deployment, as well as understanding more about what we're going to look at for a threshold to approve or deny an exemption request on daily usage. We've talked with you all quite a bit on this already, and we look forward to. We recognize this is kind of a tough nut to crack, if you will, and we look forward to continuing those conversations. I'll place one last little line down, and that is, we are not trying to game this system. We are simply trying to maintain our services for our electric and water customers safely and affordably, both safely for them, customers, but also safely for our staff, and then of course affordably for the customers. So really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this today, and we look forward to being able to talk further in the future. Thanks.
Thank you, Frank. Okay, so I think that's everyone in person. So now we'll switch over to the online hands raised. So as a reminder, we will call on you and unmute you. At that point, please give your name and affiliation. So pass to Dorothy, who'll take over for this portion.
Okay, the first person is Steve Jepson. You should now be able to unmute yourself and talk.
Hi, my name is Steve Jepson, Executive Director for Clean Water SoCal. We represent 80 public water wastewater agencies in Southern California. Our members manage wastewater for 20 million people. We appreciate the workshop today and the direction of these regulation revisions. You don't often hear thank you, so I'll say it now. Thank you for this positive direction. Still a little bit of work to be done, but once again, we appreciate it. Also, we support the comments from CASA and other water wastewater sector representatives that you'll hear today or have heard. To protect public health and the environment, water wastewater systems must operate every minute of the day, every day during rain, fire, heat, cold, and power outages. And recently, the State Water Board has reissued 2 regulations governing wastewater collection systems. One, the enforcement policy, which was revised to increase culpability and increase fines for wastewater violations. And 2, the sanitary sewer system waste discharge requirements, which regulates wastewater collection systems and prohibits spills. That was reissued to increase enforceability. So to meet these public health and regulatory requirements in all conditions, public wastewater facilities implement multiple levels of redundancy in staffing, facilities, and equipment. Every change or replacement implemented must have equal or better reliability. That's how all of our utilities operate. We cannot backslide on reliability. So that brings us to the fleet issues. Public water wastewater fleets have already begun transitioning to zero emission where appropriate. We love clean air, but there are certain types of specialty vehicles that perform critical functions, such as vacuum, pump, and lift for long durations during critical maintenance activities and during emergencies. When the performance of these vehicles is compromised, it could be a design issue with a relatively new vehicle. It could be early wear and tear. These have to be replaced regardless of age, mileage, or hours. For this reason, we request that CARB modifies the Advanced Clean Fleet rules to allow essential public services to replace a vehicle as needed, regardless of age, mileage, or operating hours. And as mentioned by Frank, we have a fiduciary responsibility to our public ratepayers. We're not trying to waste money on new vehicles. We just have to make sure our vehicles have equal or better reliability and can perform at all times. Also want to request that combination vacuum jet truck be added to the list of vehicles only available as ICE. So I also wanted to support Frank Harris's comments on the daily usage. The mileage usage is problematic for us because many times mileage is not that high. It's the work that that engine is doing, providing power through power takeoff so that needs to be looked at carefully. And I also wanted to support the comments from Nick Blair and Frank Harris and Sieb on the fleet expansion. We're not necessarily in control of fleet expansion. We have regulations requiring more maintenance, more resiliency, more emergency response capability. And we have regulations and policies from the State Water Board, such as the Wastewater Needs Assessment Policy, which is actively looking at areas where collection and water systems need to expand to meet public needs. This is an expansion that we're not in control of, and we'll need to have the appropriate vehicles to maintain these systems. So, wanted to share that as well. So I'll end with that. And one question. With regards to the qualifications of a specialty vehicle, there was a talk about passenger, and we just want to make sure, sometimes our trucks have crew cabs so we can carry 5 or 6 passengers. It's not a bus. And I just wanted to get some clarification on that. And that'll conclude my comments. Thank you very much for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Steve. On that question, so is focus on the vehicles that are primarily designed to carry cargo or passengers. So like a bus is designed to move people, but a work truck with a crew cab is designed to do work and carry the workers back and forth. So that wouldn't be a case where that would still be able to be a traditionally totally specialized vehicle.
Good. Thanks for that clarification.
Okay, next is David Rothbart. You should now be able to unmute yourself and make your comment.
Good morning, and thank you for holding this workshop. My name is David Rothbart, and I'm the manager of the Air Quality Engineering section at the Los Angeles County Sanitation Districts. Our organization is responsible for providing wastewater treatment services for approximately 5.5 million residents of Los Angeles County. We're a member of CASA, and we fully support the comments made by Sarah Delorier and other CASA members. The sanitation districts have already purchased over 110 light duty and 28 medium or heavy duty zero emission vehicles. While we are committed to supporting zero emission technologies, it is vital for us to maintain reliability of vehicles to provide wastewater treatment services. Therefore, public agencies must have the ability to replace vehicles when they become unreliable, regardless of their age, mileage, or operating hours. For example, we have a crane truck used for moving pumps and other wastewater equipment. Despite having only 34,000 miles and 1,200 operating hours, it requires replacement, yet no zero emission vehicles are available. The current proposed thresholds do not address this situation, so we respectfully request that CARB modify the ACF to allow essential public services to replace vehicles as needed, regardless of age, mileage, or operating hours. I do want to note that we appreciate the replacement purchase plan option, but still believe that the proposed threshold should be excluded, primarily because it sets an artificial threshold that may not be appropriate for those that may not understand the difference between the two options. But thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Next is Matt Zarega. You should now be able to unmute yourself.
Oh, there we go. Okay, thank you. That option to unmute just appeared. Good morning. Thanks for continuing the public discussion on ACF and about AB 1594. And I appreciate you taking my question. My name is Matt Zarega. I'm the director of fleet consulting for Terra Verde Energy. We're an independent energy advisory services firm and the preferred provider for Aqua. And I work with several water agencies throughout the state. This discussion, I think, helps everyone completely and accurately understand ACF requirements and all the nuance about how to comply. It's my experience that everyone is trying their best, which is good. That said, with my water agency and commercial fleet customers, the topic of available continues to come up, particularly with regard to the demonstrated commercial history and financial disposition of the OEM and the operating history of the vehicle, the ZEV, and or its power system and drive components. I understand that the attributes that define available are in the reg, but it's not my experience with customers that fleet operators are keenly aware of what defines available. So I think it would be helpful for everyone in the context of AB 1594 and ACF in general to help everyone understand the definition of available, particularly with respect to financial disposition of the OEM and in terms of demonstrated commercial history. If we have time today to provide some clarity here, I think it would be helpful to public agency utilities, especially those that don't have regulatory attorneys on their full-time staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Next is Stephen Poncelay.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Stephen Poncelay, Truckee Donner Public Utility District. Thank you so much for the detailed information, discussion, and opportunity to speak. We serve approximately 15,000 customers in the High Sierra electric and water utility. And we've been engaged in this rulemaking process from the beginning and have submitted many comments and letters. Fundamentally, we still struggle with the fact that this regulation's written for transport of people, goods, and equipment, which is why miles and all these things keep coming up. And water, electric, and wastewater utilities do work and maintain critical infrastructure and support emergency response. So we've had this fundamental disconnect that we've been trying to work through. And work is the optimal term here, and it's a unit of energy, and CARB has the ability to turn miles or hours or gas into a unit of energy and do that. So I encourage you to do that. And we appreciate the specialized vehicle definition. For us, it's got to be off-road. I like the towing because we all do it. All our vehicles are set up to tow. And it has to be warranted for the purpose, for the intended use, with dealer support. And so while a spec sheet and, being able to make 1 or even 100, is a great start, we need things that work. And when they break, we need to get them fixed, and they need to be warranted. We can't, as fiduciaries, buy things that aren't warranted for what we're using them for. So we did provide detailed calculations one time to demonstrate the work of 1 tank of gas. We took a 350 equivalent, a 550 equivalent, a big line off-road line truck, and a Vector. And we converted that in the capacity to work of 1 tank of gas, which isn't sufficient because we fuel in the field, but for the purposes of calculation. And that information was presented to CARB, and I would encourage you to look at it again, and happy to do that because it demonstrated the limitations. It demonstrated the loss of payload because the weight of the battery had not been considered. Every vehicle gets upscaled. So we need to continue that discussion. When we talked about work in the past, Mr. Brazil years ago said, hey, don't worry about work. It's going to be handled by the daily use exemption. So we focused on that. And then the regulation came out saying, hey, it's great, just drop your top 3. And for us, we can't do that. We plan for the most extreme situation. And as Emily and others have said, it's getting worse. We should be getting the top 3 plus some multiplier, not minus. So as a utility responsible for public health and safety, we can't go there with anything less than the most extreme. And I know that puts CARB staff in an odd position. So that did lead to, public electric and water utilities pushing for the adoption of AB 1594 because we had to have it. And that passed unanimously, minus 1 vote in both chambers. And so people understood that CARB or no one's going to achieve their goals if we don't have a grid and we don't have water and we don't have wastewater. And so we can't meet CARB's goals without affordable, reliable, and safe electric service and essential services. So we must consider and prepare for the extreme. And we're asking for CARB to help us get there. That's what this proceeding is about. Earlier, Molly made the comment of tens, hundreds, and 1,000 when talking about electric, water, and wastewater utilities. And that sounds like a lot. And oh my God, this is a huge portion of the state's emissions. We are 1% of the fleet regulated by this regulation. And so we're talking about a small percent of a small percent. And I asked CARB to consider what's the benefit of getting a small percent of a small percent to reduce emissions against everything you've heard today. And we're here to continue working with you, and we really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Next is Allison Torres. You should now be able to unmute yourself.
Good morning. My name is Allison Torres, and I work for the Eastern Municipal Water District. EMWD is a water, wastewater, and recycled water agency located in Southwest Riverside County. Thank you for coordinating this workshop and for all the efforts on these amendments. The presentation and draft language are very helpful, and I appreciate CARB's consideration for all the feedback from stakeholders. I support the comments made by CASA and Clean Water SoCal. I do have a few specific questions and comments that I'd like to highlight. First, I believe another commenter asked about the table one thresholds and the source of those thresholds. I'd like to echo that comment and that question. These appear high, specifically for the class 7 and 8 mileage thresholds. They don't appear representative for CNG vehicles in those class sizes. So I'd like to ask that CARB provide some more background on the source of the thresholds. And if the table is included in the regulation, we ask that the thresholds are carefully considered and not too restrictive. The second comment is thank you for the confirmation on the 2 early access option pathways with the purchase plan or the table 1 thresholds. I find the draft language a little confusing regarding the 2 options. So I do suggest some modifications to the language to clarify that. And lastly, I'd like to echo some of the comments on the daily usage exemption and the need to include hours, not just mileage. So again, thank you for allowing me to comment today on these amendments and for considering my comments.
Okay, thank you for the comments. In response to the question about the source of these thresholds used on the slide, I believe these came from, it's documents from the PUC and it's documents that the PUC approved private utilities to use when determining thresholds, I think, or a recommendation. We can follow up and provide the actual documents. Apparently in the state administrative manual section 4126, but we can just send you the information. That'll probably be simpler. But yeah, we're trying to use basically what we heard from some of the private utilities that cover that they are kind of compelled to follow PUC direction. So we tried to use the same thresholds that the PUC is using there. But we can just definitely discuss this and see if any adjustments need to be made.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I want to go ahead and address the hour question because it keeps coming up. The regulation specifically does include hours as a criteria that you can use for the daily usage exemption, but it does require collecting some data, obviously on hours, but also the comparable energy use for an equivalent battery electric vehicle performing the same kind of function. So it is addressed and can be included in the regulation as already drafted. So.
Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you, Allison. Our next commenter is Heidi Oriel. You should now be able to unmute yourself.
Great, thank you. Good morning. I'm Heidi Oriel with the Sacramento Area Sewer District, and I appreciate the opportunity to contribute today. Sac Sewer provides wastewater services for 1.6 million people right here in the Sacramento region. We own and operate 5,000 miles of sewer pipe, and we operate a treatment facility that safely treats more than 150 million gallons per day. Our facilities operate 24/7 to protect human health and the environment, so consistent and reliable response to emergencies is essential to carry out that mission. We strongly support the implementation of the AB 1594 requirements in the ACF regulations to make sure that our services and our emergency response can be implemented reliably. So we greatly appreciate your efforts to draft regulatory language to that end and the opportunity to comment. Sac Sewer is a member of the California Association of Sanitation Agencies, and so we do support CASA's comments on the regulations today. And in particular, we support the desire to try to better clarify the definition of traditional specialized utility vehicle. One of the important things is that we believe Class 2B vehicles do need to be included in that definition and added to the options. One example of a Class 2B vehicle that we rely upon is a CCTV vehicle that sees really low mileage but sits at sewer manholes to conduct essential inspection work to either identify preventative maintenance that's needed or to respond to emergency overflows and blockages. And these vehicles use a lot of power to launch motorized cameras through the system, to power video equipment on the mobile cameras, to run lights and video equipment and either AC or heat for the operators that need to sit within the vehicle while it's operating, and then to power lights outside the vehicle. That's just one example. So in conjunction with CASA, we'll plan on following up with some written comments to provide some more specific examples of vehicles that we think should fall within this definition. Thanks for the opportunity to comment today, and we look forward to working with you further on these revisions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. Next is Walter Lynn. You should now be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you so much, everyone, and good morning. My name is Walter Lynn. I'm the Deputy Director for the Public Works Department for the City of San Jose. We manage more than 3,000 vehicles and related assets that help to support public safety and non-public safety for our city operations, which those operations then go to support the nearly 1 million residents within the city, the thousands of businesses, as well as the million workers and visitors that visit San Jose on an annual basis. I want to thank you and the CARB team for this presentation and all the information that you've been sharing with us as well. I just wanted to share with you an inquiry and also some mentions of references in terms of some of the challenges that we're experiencing here in San Jose. In particular, with the availability and also the competition of trying to purchase some of the heavier eligible vehicles as well within the Class 2 to 8 range. And my apologies if this is redundant or if this has been mentioned before. But we're hearing that some particular manufacturers and their limited supply may only be providing a very restricted amount of vehicles into California. One particular chassis type, they may only be providing 10 in California. And if we are trying to compete and purchase one of those 10 or multiples of those 10s, amongst the other municipalities and other large organizations that need that type of vehicle, that would be a big challenge for us. In addition, the pricing range that we're hearing as well, we're hearing could be 3 times the amount of an ICE equivalent. We were discussing this a bit more with the League of California Cities recently, and they were surprised. They were indicating that 3 times the amount seems low, and that they're hearing that the magnitude of the purchase price to a comparable ICE can be much larger as well. Then on top of that, it's the EVSE, the supply equipment for the charging infrastructure. That is going to be a challenge for us as well too, especially with the higher level vehicles that we are procuring. Just the energy demand, whether our local utility PG&E is able to provide that demand to some of our hubs where these vehicles dwell. Just that electric demand alone would require service upgrade, which we may or may not be able to get very quickly from the utility, and then that particular associated cost as well. I did also want to mention some of the past challenges that we've had with some of these larger vehicles where we were buying them. Some of these manufacturers of these vehicles have gone out of business. And then the maintenance of these vehicles or the replacement parts, that becomes a great challenge for us as well too. Lastly, my inquiry is, I understand that a lot of the exemptions are focused on the participation through the ZEV milestone approach. Just curious if there are other exemptions that may be available if municipalities or large entities decide not to participate through the milestone approach. Thank you.
Sure, I can address some of those points. So just to clarify, for state or local governments who are following the default ZEV purchase schedule, they do have access to almost all of the same exemptions as those following the ZEV milestones approach. So just want to clarify that. So the ZEV purchase exemption, daily usage exemption, infrastructure delay exemption, backup vehicle exemption, pretty much all of those are going to be available to public fleets using either the ZEV purchase schedule or ZEV milestones option. You mentioned difficulty in achieving power at your needed site. Definitely look into the infrastructure delay extension because we did design that specifically to address issues with utilities being able to get the needed power to the sites where you're replacing vehicles. Unfortunately, the regulation does not address ZEV pricing, and I do not believe that we're looking to expand it to address ZEV pricing. And in terms of availability and competition to purchase, so just because a manufacturer makes a ZEV does not necessarily mean that they're willing to sell it to a fleet. So if you find that you're in a situation where you're looking to replace an eligible vehicle and the manufacturer won't sell it to you for any reason, whether it's because they don't make it or they've already sold their 10 that they're allocating to California to another fleet, you could apply for a ZEV purchase exemption in that case. And again, that is available under both of the compliance pathways there.
Yeah, one thing I can ask is there are some differences in terms of the eligibility between if you're on the ZEV milestones pass zone or the ZEV purchases. So if you have questions, definitely feel free to reach out to us. We can help you with any of the compliance questions. ZEVfleet@arb.ca.gov is our go-to place for any of that, but happy to help on that.
Thank you so much.
Okay, next is Jennifer Goodsell. You should now be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Jennifer Goodsell. I'm the General Services Manager at the Imperial Irrigation District. IID is the largest irrigation district in the nation and the third largest public power provider in the state of California. On the energy side, we serve economically disadvantaged customers across a 6,500 square mile service territory. We're members of the Southern California Public Power Authority, the California Municipal Utilities Association, and the Association of California Water Agencies. I would like to start off by thanking CARB, especially the staff, for the multiple meetings over the last several months and the efforts that you all have taken to understand the unique circumstances faced by a public utility in serving the residents of this state, as well as implement the intent of AB 1594. The proposed language on the revised definition of a specialized utility vehicle is consistent with the comments that we've submitted, and the options provided for alleviating the concerns with the 13th model year requirement have been addressed for my organization. So thank you very much for that. The daily usage exemption is a bit more complicated. I'd hope that we can continue to work together and find a common ground on our differences with this exemption, and maybe have a few more meetings to understand each other a little bit better and refine that language. Like all of the other utilities, IID also has an obligation to serve anyone who wants to connect to our system, whether it be water or power. So we do not have control over fleet expansion, and it would be helpful for us to have the flexibility of the exemptions for them to apply to the new utility vehicles in our fleet as well. And we would like to request further consideration on this matter if CARB is so willing. And then lastly, I would like to remind everyone, I haven't heard it discussed today, that the supply chain disruptions are still very real. The union strike along the East Coast is only going to exacerbate these issues for the manufacturers. The majority of the auto parts come through the Baltimore, Maryland port, so an already difficult supply situation will likely get worse. If this continues for any period of time, we can expect to incur shortages in computer chips, other electrical components, and raw materials for items that are domestically produced. So this is going to affect everyone, not just government fleets. So if this strike continues, there may be a supply impact to this regulation as well. But I do want to thank you for your time today and thank you for staff's efforts so far.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Next is Christian Corby. You should now be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Christian Corby, and I'm the Deputy Executive Director at the California Electric Transportation Coalition, or CALETC. And I just wanted to provide brief comments. First, I wanted to thank CARB staff for collaborating so well with all the stakeholders in this process. Things are definitely headed in the right direction, and we really appreciate how well you've worked with stakeholders and how much you've been leaning in on listening to their recommendations. And then also just want to put our support behind SCAPA and NCPA and CMUA's comments today. We also believe this is headed in the right direction, but would like to just take a harder look at the daily usage exemption to make sure that that's encompassing all of the flexibility and versatility that these utilities need to provide essential services. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian.
Next is Morgan Mitchell. You should now be able to unmute yourself.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Morgan Mitchell with the Westside Water Authority as the Assistant Director of Operations and Maintenance. We manage about 400,000 acres in Northwest Kern County, multiple water districts out there, very diverse conveyance, and we have a large remote area to care for. One of the issues that we are wanting to bring up and kind of talk about is this daily use exemption needing to have 10% of your fleet already converted to EV. But the challenge that we're running into is the only vehicles that we have that are really covered by the Advanced Clean Fleet are essentially the same vehicles. And so far, they're not able to be replaced. There's no vehicle to make up for this daily use. So for districts and entities that are similar in a similar situation, what path can we take to move forward to be able to either A, get an exemption or really, I mean, I feel like I don't really know what to do, to be completely honest, and I'm hoping you guys have some sort of insight in how to be able to move forward when we have vehicles aging out, but nothing to replace them with, but we don't have the 10% fleet to be able to get an exemption.
Yeah, so just to start on that topic, I mean, the details matter. So I would like you to follow up with us on the ZEF Fleet email to get into any specific details. But as you described, if there isn't a vehicle available to purchase, then the zero emission vehicle purchase exemption would apply. And you'd be able to use that, and you wouldn't even consider the daily mileage part if the vehicle simply doesn't exist. So I think that would be the beginning point based on the way you described it. And then more broadly, the comment about the 10% threshold, I mean, that is in the regulation. It wasn't specified in 1594 as an area to look at. So we're not proposing to go there at this point to make a change there. And then just broadly on the general topic, again, details matter. So the rule does have flexibilities built into it and how you comply and so on. And so I think talking to you about your specific situation and what those flexibilities might be might help address what the rule would require and what options you have.
Yeah, I can definitely do that. And then my second question is regarding the usage thresholds for the vehicles with 4,000 hours. We also have vehicles that do not have a PTO. that have low mileage with high running hours. I believe that this was mentioned earlier that we have vehicles that we need to use as cooling stations or warming stations for our employees working in remote areas that are in these vehicle classes, but without a PTO. Again, I'd like to find a way to be able to work with you guys in finding opportunity to kind of either shift those hours or consider maybe there are certain types of vehicles that do not have a PTO with high hours, low mileage that we need to be able to cycle out sooner than later.
And it also wouldn't have a four-wheel or all-wheel drive in this case?
No, the vehicles that we have that would fall into this category are two-wheel drive, mostly because it's a lower cost option for our landowners.
Got it.
No, understood. And just to make sure we're not talking past each other, because I'm trying to separate a little bit the changes we're making associated with 1594 versus the existing rule. So whether you're in the utility fleet definition or meet the vehicle definition, the rule does have the daily usage provision. It wouldn't be it wouldn't be expanded per se, but it would still be available. Hours are still part of the core proposal, whether you have a specialized utility vehicle or not. And so the cooling example, I think that you've used, be interested. The regulation does, again, allow for hours and energy use to be factored into a daily usage exemption, for instance. But that's generally an apples to apples comparison. And if the vehicle, as you described, are doing low miles and are being like a cooling center, I might actually believe that probably a number of these battery electric trucks would probably operate longer than a combustion truck could on its fuel tank. So that's why looking at the data itself is going to be really important.
Yeah, I've done some research and talked to some manufacturers as far as that situation, and battery life is greatly impacted by severe weather. And in our area, we have temperatures of 112 to 115 for multiple days in a row. And electric vehicles typically lose about 30% of their battery life sitting in that heat, running just air conditioning alone, or they'll shut themselves off because they overheat.
Correct.
So I know it's a bit of a unique situation. It's kind of nuanced, but as we brought up, we're a percent of a percent. And we're just trying to find a way to be able to comply. We're not against this. We're just wanting to make sure that we can do this, be in compliance, and move this process forward without getting caught out and having to deal with whatever the outcome may be.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Crystal Andrade. You should now be able to unmute yourself. Crystal, you unmuted yourself, but we can't hear you.
We're still not hearing anything. Might circle back and go to the next person, circle back once Crystal gets her mic working.
Okay.
You heard something?
Go ahead, Crystal.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Perfect. I have a question. Under the model year schedule, you guys mentioned that a ZEV vehicle is not currently available. You guys will put a list of all the vehicles that are not available that we could purchase without an exemption. But what if we need these vehicles currently? Because you guys mentioned that you guys would have this list at the beginning of January of 2025. What if we need to purchase vehicles this year? What could we do in this instance?
Okay. First, can you please give your affiliation, Crystal?
So I'm Crystal Andrade. I work for Grimway Farms. It's an ag company in Kern County.
Okay, thank you. So for the ZEV purge exemption, there's two options available. So as you mentioned, the streamlined list option will be available at the start of next year. But currently, you can still go through the fleet-specific application where you submit some information about your vehicles, identifying it's not available as a ZEV or NZEV, and we'd be able to process that anytime. Yeah.
So you guys would be able to process it if we need to purchase the vehicle for 2024? Even though you guys don't have the list available of which vehicles are not available?
Okay, we can probably send you if you could reach out to the ZEV fleet account, we can send you our FAQ that kind of covers this in more detail, but you should be able to, like, in 2024, use the fleet specific application. If
Okay.
if you qualify for the exemption.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Robert Hasselbrook. You should now be able to unmute yourself.
Found it. Thank you. Yeah, so I hear a lot of references to the exceptions for ZEV purchase exemption or the daily use exemption. But those exemptions, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't identify. I'm with a company called Weatherford. I'm a regional employee consulting for the California team. In any case, with those exceptions, in order to submit and have something approved, I have to have 10% of the fleet in a compliant state. So isn't that a conundrum? Yes, there you are.
All right, let's see. Okay, so I can address that. So just to clarify, the only exemption in the regulation that requires a fleet to be at 10% ZEVs for their whole California fleet as a precondition to apply is the daily usage exemption. No other exemptions require the fleet to be at 10%. So the ZEV purchase exemption, infrastructure delay extension, backup vehicle, mutual aid, et cetera, do not require a fleet to be at 10%. It is required that fleets comply with the option that they're currently in before applying for an exemption. But again, the requirement, the 10% requirement that folks are referencing is only related again to the daily usage exemption. And part of the reason that we included that was because generally regulations do change how fleets may manage their California fleets. And so the daily usage exemption was basically structured with the idea that fleets would need to purchase ZEVs and start figuring out how to incorporate them into their California fleet and operations up to a certain point. After that point, exemptions could be granted.
Okay, if I may. So we initially thought this might be okay, but then the NZEVs we identified or ZEVs are vehicles that are not in the vehicle classifications for Group 1. We're primarily Group 2. And so we could buy these vehicles and meet our 10% target, but those vehicles will then not be in the group, and we can't make the target. So it's a real conundrum. I don't know how to meet that requirement for the 10%. And then I thought to question why you would do that. Let the request stand on its own merit.
Okay, so Robert, I think you're getting into some fleet specific details for your particular fleet. If you could send an email to zevfleet@arb.ca.gov, myself and my staff can help assist you with that because I think there might be some clarifications here that might be able to address your concerns.
Yeah, I was on a call yesterday with one of your help teams. It seems to be something that, yeah, and I was told, well, if you can find a NZEV that meets the requirements, please let us know because we're looking for them too. So yeah, it does. You're not making it easy for me to plan for the deadline that hits us in January 1st of 2027. That's all I can say.
Thank you for your comment.
Next is Mark Bayer. You should now be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, Mark Baer with Altech Industries. I'd like to get another look, just real quick, at the slide about the daily use, that table. That's the one.
Next, okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Oh, our slides are available on our website if you want to get a closer look.
Now I always thought those were a week or two after the call.
We've had them online, I think, since yesterday. So, yeah, go on our Advancing Fleets meeting events page.
Thank you.
Okay, I believe that's the last hand we have raised. So, oh, it looks like we have someone in the room again.
Yeah, thanks. This is Frank Harris with CMUA again. And I can reach out to you privately on this question, but I don't mind embarrassing myself in front of everybody because I think other people might have this question. And so as part of my question, I'll have to explain, I'll have to admit that I don't understand part of this regulation, which is, I thought I did. I just want to clarify, Tony, you mentioned that there is an energy usage provision in the daily usage exemption. And I'm reading it right now, and I just want to make sure I understand it. So when I look at 2013-1 B3, it talks about calculating the range of the vehicle divided by the capacity of the identified BEV. Okay, so that's just the BEV that's available. Therefore, we can't use a purchase exemption, that we have to use the daily usage. My logic's good so far. And so that's just the identified BEV. Now, if we go on to 2013 B3A, in lieu of calculating range as specified in section 2013 B3, fleet owners may instead submit measured BEV energy use data from BEVs of the same configuration. Great. But then it goes on, already operated on a similar daily assignment, on similar daily assignments to substantiate the exemption request. This, I think, is where we come into the problem. If the vehicle doesn't work for that application, we won't, my members won't have one deployed in that similar daily assignment. And it seems like that does take away the option of making that conversion as the regulation is currently written. And this is where I'm confused. And if you go on to subsection 4, 2013 1B4, you did make a change that I think is very positive. It's very subtle, it's very minor, but the report must include the daily miles traveled, and it used to read and energy. Now you've changed that to or energy used to drive, but it's still the energy used to drive. And so that doesn't address the energy use for PTO. So we kind of feel like we might be, one of those flow diagrams, if yes, go here, if no, go there. And then all of a sudden, when you go through your whole situation, you're nowhere. And I want to make sure that I will happily admit to everybody in the room and everybody on the call, if I've mistakenly, I misunderstood the regulation, and, mea culpa, but everybody will understand better now. It seems like either we compare it to an ICE vehicle with the BEV that we've identified that's not configured, or we have to have a BEV that's configured and already dispatched for that similar usage. And I think it's that second part where my members are having a real problem, because again, if it worked in that similar usage, we wouldn't be needing to make the daily usage exception request. So please help me.
So I can cover the energy use part first, and then I'll turn it to Tony for the requirement to purchase a BEV. So for the energy use portions, the reg does say the report must include the miles traveled and energy used to drive. If you look just beyond that same section to 2013 B4A, it does say for vehicles that operate truck mounted or integrated equipment while stationary, the daily usage report must include the energy used while stationary and number of hours such truck mounted equipment is operated each day for 30 days, et cetera. So the intent there is that we're getting both the energy used to drive and the energy used while stationary to be able to do that daily usage calculation. And I'll turn it to Tony for the.
Yeah, and so I'll add that, so that provision is ultimately structured in a way to use actual data, so like for like. We also, again, I'm not looking at the reg language directly, but in spirit, the language is written that if a given fleet, let's just use utility bucket truck as an example, because they do exist, and so you would use them in their operation. You could compare a battery electric to a conventional and collect the information to show that they're operating in a like for like. And then we would be collecting the energy use for the battery electric versus the gasoline. Because I think as somebody mentioned, we do low miles, but we use a lot of fuel, diesel, gasoline, depending on what it is. And so we would want to say, all right, how do you compare the battery electric vehicle in that type of operation to one that's using conventional fuels? And then you can use that information to then apply to the rest of the fleet of the same type of vehicles. That data can come from one of your members and be used by other members that have the same kind of vehicle, same kind of operation, for instance. So it doesn't require each and every individual fleet to do it, but it does require somebody to step forward. And what we've seen in the past frequently is that manufacturers will make a vehicle available on a demonstration basis, rental basis, or something like that, where that data could be collected without necessarily having been purchased for permanent use in the fleet, for instance. And so that's the mechanism that would allow that question of how do you compare a battery electric vehicle to a diesel that does a lot of stationary work or a lot of stationary operation kind of thing.
Okay, so yeah, we've talked about this before. That I think is still somewhat of an unrealistic expectation, but we can agree to disagree. So let's go forward though. Let's say we get that. Now you've got this one. This is an example for a class 6, and you've got these are miles numbers, and everybody online, I presume, sees that, right?
Yeah.
So they know what we're talking about here in the room. What numbers do we put in that if you're using energy or hours? Are there still, do you have to compute back to miles, or I just want to make sure I understand.
Yeah, the method would be, I mean, we use miles because it was easiest
Right.
to use. I mean,
But we
and,
could
and
put,
the regulation
we could
has
put
those
energy
default
use
values.
or hours in there.
Yeah, so at that point, when we're talking about the calculating for the energy use, we would be looking at total energy use for the vehicle. And when the and what we would be doing is in essence saying, look, the diesel vehicle operating 10 miles and all day uses so much energy in diesel, and the battery electric vehicle uses so much energy in kilowatt hours. And so that happens to be, less, for simplicity's sake, that's a 5-to-1 ratio.
Sure.
So now when you're looking at other vehicles in the fleet, you could then say, hey, these vehicles are doing even more diesel fuel use than what was comparable to that BEV. That BEV would have met the need, but anything above that, it won't meet the need on the daily basis. Okay. Then that's effectively how it would work.
All right. More to
sure. And I understand. Yeah. So we can look at the details a little more. I'm sure you can too, but that's the spirit of the approach.
Right. Right.
And that's again available to everyone, regardless of the method. But we wouldn't throw out the 3 highest readings if you're a specialized utility vehicle, where we would, and if for everybody else. Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay, I just wanted to, Morgan kind of reminded me of a question I asked that I'm not sure if was answered. So it's not directly tied to 1594. I think it's more of a compliance question for now through the end of 2026 when one is seeking an exemption. So simply, if, you know, with the 50% requirement, if you buy a ZEV now, you can buy 1 ICE, you're in compliance. But if you are seeking an exemption, like what is the order of operations for, you know, if that's going to go through? And the reason I ask is because I have members that I think in some cases have submitted requests and it's been rejected on the grounds that they currently have a 1-to-1. So it's like, there's no need, right? And I think the question is are vehicles that they seek exemption for and say it's approved, is that a separate bucket from the 1-to-1, or is it somehow looped into the 1-to-1?
So I'll preface the answer with the answer does depend on the compliance option to a degree because the way they work are different. But in terms of the purchase exemption, I'm sorry, but state and local governments using the purchase schedule, the exemption doesn't change your compliance obligation. And so in other words, if you do buy 2 vehicles as you described, if one is a ZEV, then the other one doesn't have to be, and you meet the requirement. Mm-hmm. So we've received applications from somebody in that situation. Mm-hmm. I bought a ZEV, but I want an exemption for the other truck. Mm-hmm. It's like, there's no reason for an exemption. The rule allows you to do that. Mm-hmm. We're done. Yeah. And there we are. Now, if they're buying more vehicles that might change later, but, and so for us to give an exemption in just that scenario, then what we would do is in essence say, hey, both vehicles you're looking to buy aren't available. So we would grant the exemption saying you can buy them as effectively, both of them as ICE vehicles, because none of them can be purchased as ZEVs. And that's how your exemption effectively works.
Gotcha. So I guess just maybe to fast forward, and I think a problem here too is that you have these agencies that are planning year to year. So so in some cases they have all of that in front of them of, oh, I know I'm going to buy 10 this year, so I know I have to go 5. And but then it's just some of that unknown of, are they going to add more to that, or do they, do they think they're going to have credits in the future? And I realize that, this is probably going to get more complicated, and I don't want to, I don't want to do that with, verbal comments. But yeah, I think that just continues to be a point of clarity that some of them.
So Leo, let me throw in a statement that might help a little without trying to belabor this too much. So let's just do the scenario that I did, and we just said, all right, you bought 2 vehicles. That's all you were planning to do. So you submitted your request. And so we gave you the 2 exemptions. Then later you're like, oh no, wait, I'm actually buying 4 vehicles now. So I'm going to buy a total of 4. And it's like, well, if the 2 more that you're buying are available as ZEV, you would still need to buy those. You meet your 50%. The exemptions that we granted were ultimately not needed in principle, because at the end of the day, you're at the same place. And so had you submitted all 4 at the upfront as your initial application, we would have said, hey, you're fine. You don't need an exemption. Go ahead and buy those ICE vehicles. If you did it in this 2-step process, we're effectively just saying, okay, you changed your plan because the rule is buy all your purchases in a given year. So it's like, okay, we'll look at the whole picture. And at the end of the day, we would say, because there's 2 ZEVs, buy those, and the other can be ICE. The fact that we initially gave you exemption on the first plan doesn't change your compliance obligation in any real way.
Okay, so I guess hopefully I can finish this circle here. So let's say, ideal world here, like you're in that situation where okay, so maybe you've bought 5 ZEVs, you've bought 5 ICE, you've now purchased ICE number 6. So you're obligated to buy ZEV number 6, but the next thing you need is, from what you can tell, only available as an ICE. That in that situation, you can say, I need an ICE, I need an exemption to, or
let me try one more, because this has come up in the past. Maybe we could take this offline, but no, we've had the request of, oh, look, I'm buying 2 vehicles. For simplicity, a pickup and a digger derrick. I was like, well, okay, a pickup's available as a ZEV, so I am going to strategically go ahead and buy the ICE vehicle first, then come in and ask for an exemption. And by rule, we're going to say you made 2 purchases. You could have bought a ZEV, you didn't. Well, I'm not giving you an exemption because you didn't buy the ZEV. That was available, because I can't approve it because there was a ZEV available for you to purchase based on what you actually purchased. So I don't know if that helps. So the order in which you make your purchases doesn't change the outcome.
Okay. I will take that back and see if that answers it, or if we need to.
Right, and by all means, if there's a detailed question, have them email ZEVfleet, and we can get on the phone if we need to and sort of things.
And I do want to say that because it's within the scope of what we've shared here for the other changes to 1594, that is one of the changes that we put in for the state and local governments to I guess just hit the nail a little bit more on the head, that all vehicle purchases made during a calendar year will be assessed when determining the necessity of the exemption. So that was already implied by how the regulation was set up, but because we've had questions about this, that was one area that we were looking to hit a little bit more on the head there.
And it does, you're gonna look at the end of the year to see if they are in compliance, but you're saying that in theory, it should not matter what time of the year it is that they made the requests, assuming that they do need it and they can make proof.
Right.
Okay.
And in your specific example, you gave that where the fleet bought that 6th ICE vehicle and now we need to buy another ZEV.
Yeah.
That ICE vehicle that they purchased, if it could have been purchased as a ZEV, we would say, hey, no, you got to go replace that one with a ZEV instead of granting an exemption for the last ZEV or the last purchase that wouldn't be available as a ZEV, if that makes sense.
Okay, I'll take that back and I'll let you know. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else in person? Okay. Yeah.
more hands.
Next is Joe Dallum. You should now be able to unmute yourself.
Great, thank you. This is Joe Dallum, and I'm president of Odine Systems. Odine develops and sells electrification systems for medium and heavy duty trucks. We specialize in providing EPTO systems that operate with zero emissions at the work site. And we appreciate CARB's efforts to recognize the unique characteristics of the traditional utility specialized vehicles. The question is, the systems for EPTO have been shown to work with digger derricks, bucket trucks, underground cable pullers, cranes, aerial booms, tanker trucks, line clearance, tree trimming trucks with a bucket, and other power takeoff applications that are listed as part of the traditional utility specialized vehicles. The question is, given the high emissions that come out of a powered takeoff on a traditional vehicle, is there any, let's say, additional regulatory incentives to use electric powered takeoff technology that eliminates the emissions at the work site? These systems are robust in that they will continue, some of them will continue to operate even if the vehicle has not been plugged in prior to the day's usage. It operates in a hybrid mode, still reducing emissions. So that's my first question is there any regulatory incentive to encourage fleets that use this traditional utility specialized vehicle criteria to use an electric power takeoff?
So in terms of the EPTO by itself with a combustion vehicle, that is currently not in the regulation, but we'll take your comment back in terms of if it's relevant here.
Yeah, or it would be for a replacement vehicle with an ICE. And then the second question relates to section 2013.2 C2K, which is a section that mandates that public utilities and other entities report certain criteria on the vehicles that they operate. One of those is the miles driven. The other, though, the question I'd have is, given that power takeoff hours are important as far as fuel consumption and emissions, is CARB contemplating adding a criteria for recording and reporting PTO hours on vehicles that are subject to that regulation?
Sure. Okay, sorry about that. Currently, we only require the odometer to be reported for vehicles that are getting close to aging out or for vehicles that are using the backup vehicle provision. Currently, there's no proposal or regulatory need to have fleets report their power takeoff hours.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, just pointed that out because that could be also a significant indicator of high emissions vehicles with power takeoffs that are operated using an internal combustion engine. Thank you for your response. Appreciate it.
Thanks for your comment.
Next is Curtis Malins. You should now be able to unmute.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Awesome. Okay, so I have a couple questions. So first off,
sorry, can you start with your affiliation?
Oh, sure. My name is Curtis Malins. I am the fleet manager for Diamond Environmental Services. We're based out of San Diego.
Thank you.
No problem. So regarding Class 7 vehicles, we've reached out to all the major manufacturers, and although they advertise 180 to 250 miles per charge, once they put the body on them, they're saying they get an average of 100 miles for a single charge. So is there any type of blanket regulation going towards these vehicles?
In terms of the ACF regulation, there would be potentially the daily usage exemption that the fleet could apply for if they qualify otherwise and have already reached 10% ZEVs. So there is a mechanism in the regulation to address vehicles that cannot meet the fleet's demonstrated daily mileage or energy use needs.
Got it. Okay. The other question I have is, so right now the average body build that it takes on our trucks, we're only getting about 20 trucks built per year. So for us to convert the remainder of our trucks, it would take us about 5 years. What type of exemptions are going into specialized vehicles for the body build times?
There's currently no exemptions that address bodybuilding times. However, the regulation does provide flexibility. So for example, if you purchase a ZEV and it takes a handful of years to get built, the regulation has the vehicle delivery delay extension, which if you've taken action 1 year ahead of a compliance deadline to place your purchase order for a ZEV, and it takes longer than that year to get built and delivered to you, the vehicle delivery delay provision would address those delays to ensure that the fleet stays in compliance.
Make sure it's separate.
And just to clarify, for Diamond Environmental Services, is this a high priority fleet, so private greater than 50 million or greater than 50 trucks?
Correct. Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah. And so the vehicle delivery delay would ensure that your fleet remains in compliance while you're waiting for those ZEVs to be delivered.
Awesome. And the majority of our trucks are pumper trucks for portable restrooms and septic. Would that be considered wastewater for the exemption?
The regulation defines a wastewater fleet very clearly. I believe that they also have to be implementing provisions of Senate Bill 1383 to basically convert organic waste into biomethane. So please take a look at the regulation's definition of a wastewater fleet.
Yeah.
That will
And-
narrow that definition a bit.
I guess one thing, and I need to look at the regulation for this, but we have a definition of wastewater treatment provider that's specific to 1594. And we have a definition for wastewater that's used in a different provision or specific to SB 1383, as Chris mentioned. So what we're discussing today is specific to these wastewater treatment providers, but there's a separate provision that Chris mentioned that may be applicable also. So you might want to look at the two of those, or reach out to ZEV Fleet to reach out to get some more information from us.
Perfect. And final question is, we're having a hard time finding any fast chargers in the San Diego area that can actually fit a truck with a 26-foot flatbed body for our other vehicles. Are there going to be some more being built, or are we going to be notified of when those will be implemented?
Our team is not focused on the infrastructure side of things. Can we get them in touch with our infrastructure? Yeah, we could get you in touch with some of our folks more focused on infrastructure and public deployments. So if you want to reach out to ZEV Fleet asking that, we can get you in touch with the right people.
Okay. Yeah, I actually used your guys' website to locate all the chargers, and we couldn't find a single one that would fit it. So that was the problem. I was just wondering for upcoming builds or something.
I don't think Out of the Table can help you with that.
Okay.
Next is Mark Bayer. You should now be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, Mark Baer with Altec Industries. Some time ago, earlier in the year, one of the trig calls made note that a contractor will be hired and process flow charts to help fleets with the many pivots and twists and turns within this regulation. Has a visual process flow chart. And I guess, with the municipal fleets, it might not be finalized, this regulation, until early next year. But I guess I was just curious if that's something, on the to-do list, so to speak.
We are looking to put out a number of different outreach materials, and we have been putting out, fact sheets, FAQs, checklists, training videos. There's a number of resources available on the ACF webpage and the ZEV Truck Stop webpage. In terms of specifically a flow chart, it's not something we've looked at, but we can certainly take your comment back and see if that's something that we can look into.
Thank you. One more note. I'd like to second the notes from Joe Dallum that the EPTO category is one of opportunity. And it should be noted that as we look at the marketplace, what's currently going on is that fleets are sitting on the sideline waiting for Advanced Clean Fleet to receive the EPA waiver authorizing enforcement. In the meantime, they're not investing in electrification EPTO job sites for ICE applications because their budget will be so impacted by the EV targets they need to make. So just wanted to make a note that this EPTO category fits the application of a vehicle that does not drive around all day, tends to sit at the job site and roar at a high idle all day. And the EPTO, creating a zero emissions job site is a nice pivot point that customers are in essence steering away from, even in an ICE application, because of what they have to invest in for full EVs. So, I would, as Joe was suggesting, see if there's a carve out that could be considered for a very application specific value in EPTO engine off at the job site. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Thomas Green. You should now be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Tom Green. I'm with Rancho Water in Temecula, and we service Temecula, Murrieta, and a lot of the county areas for both drinking water and sanitation. We agree with the comments from Aqua and CMUA. I had a specific question. When we started budgeting for this fiscal year, we didn't see any vehicles in the ZEVs that would meet it. So knowing the 50-50, we just didn't budget for any vehicles this year. But in the meantime, our sanitation or sewer operators, he did budget for a vehicle, but he didn't realize this was all happening. And so when it came to it, we'd tell him, no, you can't buy. He needs a jetter to clean out sewer lines, and he needs ones that are more powerful than the ones that he has, and he needs it in 4-wheel drive. So that's a 2-engine vehicle, and it seems like it would be exempt, but we're not sure about that. And the other thing was, it just seems like, well, there's still no reason for not getting 2 vehicles. And we told him you can't do it till next year. His question is that the base vehicle is available now. It's going to be built and it's not going to be delivered till next year. Does the purchasing rule for date of purchase, does it have to be when it's purchased? Could it be when it's delivered? Because we can put in budget in December for purchase next fiscal year for a ZEV vehicle, and just wondering about the clarification about that.
Sure. So I guess just to start, for the 2-engine vehicles, we do have a definition of a 2-engine vehicle in the regulation, and if that vehicle that he's looking to purchase meets that definition, then that vehicle is just completely exempt from the regulation. They can purchase that without needing to meet the 50-50 requirement. In terms of changing the 50-50 requirement for the state and local governments, it is based on purchases made during a calendar year. To modify that would require a major change to the regulation. However, the fleet, if they did want to go based on vehicle deliveries, could opt into the ZEV milestones option, which is based on vehicle deliveries, not vehicle purchases made during a calendar year. So that there is an option in the regulation for fleets if they want to do that.
Thank you.
Next is April Hamed. You should now be able to unmute yourself.
Hello, thank you for this opportunity. My name is April Hamoud from HFH Consultants. Our firm assists public agencies with their trash and recycling contracts with solid waste haulers. So this regulation affects our municipal haulers and solid waste haulers. I have two questions. The first one is, has CARB approved any exemptions and extensions to date? And my second question is that one of my jurisdictional clients is asking, are there any requirements for electric utility companies to do anything related to this regulation? Thank you.
Sure, I can address those. Just we are getting a little bit off topic for the discussion today, but I'll go ahead and answer your questions quickly. Yes, CARB has approved exemptions and extensions. You can look at our last recorded TRIG meeting on the ACF meetings and events page for the truck regulation implementation work group for rule provisions. The recording of that meeting, towards the end of that meeting, we discussed the exemptions and extensions granted and denied to date. So for more details, please check out that recording. And there is no requirement in the regulation for utilities to provide infrastructure. However, utilities may be regulated as a fleet that must acquire zero emission vehicles.
Thank you.
Thank you. I believe that's our last hand up. So anyone in the room who wants to comment, go ahead.
Yes, it's just a brief comment about the streamline list. Since I heard the jetter truck mentioned, we did have a request that we'll include in the letter and probably with more detail for our grounding. But we would like to have you consider the combination vacuum jetter truck as an ICE only vehicle because it doesn't always fall under that 2-engine or dual engine exemption and it's just super critical for operations and maintenance.
And just to clarify, we are looking at vacuum trucks in general on the streamlined list. So those are included in there and included in the reg language.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay, I don't see anyone else in the room, and I do now see. Okay, I'm not seeing at the moment any hands up, so I think that will conclude this. So as a reminder, if you have any questions or feedback on the workshop, please reach out to our ZevFleet email address, and we're looking for feedback somewhat soon. So next 2 weeks, if you like us, 3 weeks if you don't, that'll be great. Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you all for your time. We greatly appreciate your conversations up to this point. We hope to keep having them. Thank you.